Well, let's define grief. And actually the way we'll do that is by recognizing that we can't define grief. There is no one grief. The most we can really say about grief is it is the response to loss. Now, that loss could be due to a death. It could be a divorce or a breakup. It could be a choice that we've made, or it could be out of our control entirely. But also, it can be grieving our good health, or grieving a lost limb, or grieving a the loss of a job. It can also be grieving the loss of what isn't going to happen anymore. We can grieve things that were never actually there, but now we know they never will be. So all of these can be, and more, can be defined under that term grief. And I think all we can really say about it is it's a response to perceived loss. Otherwise, there are no rules. There are no rules to what you feel or when it comes to grief. Now, that doesn't mean that then anything that comes up as part of the grieving period is now mandatory. Like, it doesn't matter how my grief shows up. If it is, well, another good way to look at it is an adaptive response. It it usually takes place over a time, and however long it takes us to adjust to that perceived loss. Okay. Now, if we do not adjust to that loss, then this is usually what we would then label complicated grief or prolonged grief or persistent grief. And often it comes with something else, like there seems to be something else getting in the way. And what I would suggest that is what we've already talked about. So I would suggest that this is us not feeling safe with our experience, resisting it, not letting it be there. And there are a whole multitude of different reasons why we do that. You may, depending on how you felt about the person or whatever it is that you lost, it might be that grief never ends. It might be that you grieve that person for the rest of your life. This isn't about bringing an end to grief. It's about that grief being something that is peaceful. Meaning that when an experience arises, you see it for what it is. Specifically, you are not defined by it. And you allow it to be there without resistance. And what we discover is each of those little experiences within grief are transient and temporary. Now, to make a distinction between those experiences and what I would call suffering, I do believe that you can grieve and not suffer that grief. Does it have to take a long time? No, it does not have to take a long time. If your thoughts and feelings are feeling unsafe, then watch my free training, How to Stop Feeling Trapped in Grief and Feel Like Yourself Again. The link is in the description. Now, for a lot of people, the idea that these thoughts and these feelings are going to be there, and the goal, so to speak, is to feel safe with them rather than getting rid of them, there is a resistance to that idea. And that's because I think when we hear this idea of being safe with our thoughts and feelings, it might conjure up that you now have to build resilience and that you have to build strength and you have to harden in order to let them be there. You often hear this phrase in grief discourse that you have to feel it to heal it. And this isn't quite the same thing. We're not sitting with it and feeling it intensely in order to desensitize ourselves to it, or in order to build a resilience to it, or in order to be strong in its presence. But instead, what we're doing is we're recognizing that no thought or feeling was ever a threat to us. You don't need to be strong with it. You don't need to heal from a wound because you were never damaged. You were never broken. What you learn to recognize in order to feel safe is that you were always safe. Now, that doesn't mean don't have feelings. This isn't about not having experiences. This is about being able to live life fully and experience everything without needing to escape it, to fix it, or to fight it. When I lost my father to suicide, the identity felt inescapable. It was absolute, inescapable dread. I was doomed to repeat his life. Because my relationship, as were most of his relationships, was complicated. He suffered in life, mentally and emotionally. And this came out in all sorts of different ways. I am my father's son, meaning that it's very easy for me to recognize him in me. And at the time, it was very easy for me to resent all of that because there are genetic traits that seemed to point towards, well, this also means I have to feel this way, and it also means this is who I am as well. So any of his behavior that seemed narcissistic or seemed insecure, anxious, depressed, any of that stuff, the overthinking, was very easy to recognize in myself, not as the outcomes, but the small little behaviors that were attached onto those things, which were the genetic behaviors. And so at the point that he couldn't escape it, and so his solution to that was to end his life, all of a sudden his life became my future. It was like it sealed my identity. And that identity was inescapable. Because the only way that he found escape from it was to take his life. And so the result of that was a whole bunch of experiences that if we looked at them individually, it might seem like I'm dealing with loss. But that particular version of grief was that I had identified. This was proof of who I was, not just of who he was. And so that didn't feel safe to me. And the way that I responded to that lack of safety was a whole array of extreme experiences. Sometimes I thought I was dying. I just thought I was going to die. I was just going to drop dead. That's what I thought. I have specific memories of being at work and believing I was about to drop dead, but trying to hide it and kept playing this idea in my head that there were a couple of hundred people around me and none of them were going to understand that because I wasn't saying anything. I thought that I was probably gonna die the way he died, not because I was planning to take my life. It was just the assumption that the result of this identity was, it was terminal. Being like this is terminal. So I thought that at some point I was going to decide the same thing because it was inescapable. But that doesn't mean I am him. Like, far from it. There are lots of traits that I have that are like him. But those traits are not the things that defined his suffering either. And so suddenly it feels safe to be me, no matter who I'm related to. So ultimately, in order to really deepen your understanding of this, it is not a technique or an activity that you need to engage with, and it's actually the opposite of that. The radical thing to do is nothing. So, just to give an example, if I have suffered what you might call a traumatic loss, then each experience that I have, mental or emotional experience, can seem to mean something or say something about who I am, or say something about how well I am coping, or even say something about the relationship or the person that I've lost. And when it seems to point towards that, the natural thing to do is to try and solve this experience, meaning to figure it out, to fix it, or to get rid of it. And so we do things in order to solve that experience. Now, for some of us, we sit and we ruminate, and we go through it alone, and we go very. We turn our attention into our own thinking. So maybe we try to think our way out of it, or we go over scenarios over and over again. Others might look outward and go to see counselors or therapists, or they might engage in hacks, positivity hacks, and that kind of thing. But all the while, we're trying to solve this problem. And some of those things do offer relief. But ultimately, what they also do is they reinforce the idea that there was something wrong with you to begin with. And the moment we stop trying to fix ourselves is the moment we stop continuing to tell the story that there is something wrong with me. If your grief has started to feel dangerous, then click on the link in the description to watch my free training, How to Stop Feeling Trapped in Grief and Feel Like Yourself Again. When I say don't do anything, I don't mean stop thinking about anything. I don't mean stop feeling anything. I mean stop engaging in um, an active response to those things. So imagine it like this. So if I say to you, don't think of a tiger. Whatever you do, don't think of a tiger. Now, for almost every single one of you, if not all of you, the moment I tell you to not think of a tiger, some version of a tiger popped up in your experience. For most of you, that will be the mental image of a tiger. Now, this is called ironic rebound. So what this demonstrates is, to the degree that we try to not have an experience, We have to hold that experience quite closely in order to check if we're not thinking about it. Just to be, just to explain that further, you have to keep thinking, am I not thinking of a tiger now? Am I not thinking of a tiger now? And each time you have to conjure up that thought of a tiger in order to check if you're not thinking about it. Okay, so this is called ironic rebound. The act of trying to not have the experience is the very thing that keeps the experience looping. Now, for a moment, let's imagine that there was more than one of you. So the second version of you is now looking across at the first version of you thinking, my goodness, they are really trying hard to resist this image of a tiger. Why are they doing that? Well, the only reason would be if that was somehow dangerous to me, if it were a threat. Otherwise, why else would I be trying so hard to not think of this tiger? I know what I will do. The next time the mental image of a tiger pops up, I will prepare the body to deal with this. Now, that might be that it releases certain hormones in order to fight the tiger. Or it might be that it releases certain hormones to run away from the tiger. It might be that it releases certain hormones to numb me. It might be that it releases certain hormones to make me freeze. Okay? It's different for each one of us. But the next time I see that mental image of a tiger, I will prepare to deal with it. So now, because the mental image of a tiger keeps on popping up over and over and over and over again, so do the hormones keep getting released over and over and over and over again. Now, all this does, if we loop this back round to the first version of you, who's trying really hard to resist this mental image of the tiger, and each time it does, there is a physical response that it then links to the mental image of the tiger. So now it looks like the mental image of a tiger causes this physical response, right? And so this further reinforces this idea that the mental image of a tiger is somehow dangerous. Otherwise, why would I feel like this? And so we continue to resist the mental image of a tiger. Back to the first person. Well, why else would I be doing that? I'd better prepare myself to deal with it. And now we're caught in this feedback loop. But what if the first version of you did not try to stop the experience? Let it be there. Now, what's likely to happen is those hormones would still get released. And we would still have the same experience, but no longer are we trying to not have it. Now, you're not going to suddenly flush out the hormones in one go. It's kind of like when you've had too much coffee, you can't just uncaffeinate yourself. You have to wait for that to play out. But what you have done is you've just broken the loop. Now, the second version of you isn't continuing to think, well, the image of a tiger must be dangerous. Why else would I be resisting it so much? Because you're not resisting it. We're no longer telling the story that mental images of tigers are dangerous. The loop has been broken. Now, it was likely that it's still going to continue several times, but we learn that we are actually perfectly safe with the mental image of a tiger. We learn that it's not a genuine danger to us. And so over time, that experience adapts and adjusts, and we no longer have a threat response to the image of a tiger. So when I say do nothing, at first it's going to feel like doing something, which is to stop treating the experience as dangerous. So at first it's going to feel like activity, but very quickly it's going to be recognized that this is the opposite of activity. This is the radical thing right now, is to do nothing. So the outcome of this activity of doing nothing allows you to feel safe with your thoughts, feelings, and sensations, no matter what they are. So what this means in our tiger analogy is that the mental image of the tiger can be there and nothing has to be done about it. So if it is a memory or a thought that actually you want to be there, then it can be there. It's no longer the source of pain. It is a thought. And you can allow any kind of memory or thought about the future to be there in the same way. Now, sometimes we will still interpret it as not a thought, but that's okay, because at the moment your body starts to respond in that way, you get good at recognizing that what you're responding to is a thought that wasn't seen as a thought. So now, in relation to the experience of prolonged or complicated grief, not only are you no longer suffering in the same way, but now you can remember the person fully. Like, you can remember the good stuff, the bad stuff. There is nothing that isn't included in your memory of them. Your peace and your meaning does not come from only remembering them in a certain way and not remembering them in another way. It might be that your relationship with the person that you lost was complicated in its own right. And maybe there's certain memories that keep on coming up that you would prefer not to be there. Well, the same is true of these. That first of all, once it's allowed to be there, you stop perceiving it as a threat, which means when it does come up, it's not such a problem. But because you're not actively trying to not think about it, this ironic rebound stops happening. And so those memories, as a side effect, tend to come up a lot less often. So you don't have to let go of any thoughts or any experience or any memory. You also don't have to hold on to any thought, any experience, in order for you to feel at peace, in order for you to hold on to meaning, and in order to keep your principles. At no point do I think any of you are thinking about the person you lost and not realizing that that isn't literally them, because of course you know that they are no longer here. That's not quite what I mean. What I mean is that at the point that we have a thought and don't quite recognize it as a thought at the same time, then the body responds as though there is a present moment threat. Now, it might be that the present moment threat is the thought. That's what it seems like. It seems like the thought being there is the danger, which means that yes, we understand that we are thinking about our person or whatever our loss is, and we get that it's a thought on that level. But what we don't get is that the thought that it is dangerous is present and we haven't recognized that. And so our body responds as though it's really happening now. And like I said, the body can respond in so many different ways. For some of us, we get ready to act, and others, we numb ourselves. And everything in between. And so it's not necessarily that we have the thought of the tiger and then always think that it's a tiger that's really here. But what we don't do is recognize the subsequent thought that this image must be dangerous to me. So at the moment that we can recognize our memories as thoughts and our worries as thoughts, without trying to do anything about it, you may very well still get caught up in the story. We are excellent storytellers. And when I say story, I don't mean it's completely fabricated. There are historical events, accurate historical events within our memories. But at the point that we're experiencing it right now, it is a present moment thought. Even the sensations and the feelings in those moments when we get caught up and don't recognize the thought as a thought, even that response is safe. Even those sensations are safe. And so when we notice this, when we know this deep down inside, we don't have to not feel them. Even their presence, even sadness or anger can be there because we're not having the extra experience of trying to get rid of it. And it's that extra experience. That's where the suffering lies. And so it's not a case of no longer feeling anything. That's not the goal. The goal is to be able to feel everything. And that not be overwhelming. And that not be a problem. And that not be frightening.